Say hello to Big Bertha, the original DIY beef jerky gun. I'm going to show you step by step how to make this gun, and it's not only going to work great, it's going to last you the rest of your life. So let's get this project started. At first, I looked on Amazon to buy a beef jerky gun. I started looking at all sorts of different models on Amazon, and like anybody else, I want to look at the reviews, and the one thing I like concentrating on is the bad reviews. You know, is it a bad review because someone was just having a bad day, or are there some real serious failures here? And there were. Even on the best guns, there were pretty bad reviews that I didn't want to be a part of. The other thing I didn't like is after your 30 days are up on Amazon, if you're a Prime member, you know, you're out of luck if you want to send this thing back. And the other thing I didn't appreciate was there were no parts available for these. So if I had a small spring or something break, I wasn't going to be able to get a part for these. So that's when I decided, well, I know what I'll do. I'll just start looking for articles on how to build my own beef jerky gun. And that's where I was really surprised. I found absolutely nothing on Google, and that doesn't happen too often. You know, usually there's something going on, and no one I found had made a DIY beef jerky gun. I found a couple forums where people talked about it, but they never acted on it. So I thought, well, this is a good challenge for me, and that's where this whole journey begins. And I'm going to show you how you can make this very same gun that I've designed, and let's get started with what we're going to need to do that. Now, here's a picture of the gun that I designed after about 3 different beta tests and at least 40 different versions of the parts that I needed. A lot of them are 3D printed, and don't get scared if you don't have a 3D printer. We're going to talk about that later in the video on how we can solve that problem for you too. But you can also see that this is a steel caulk gun, and it's one of the larger caulk guns. It's one of the 1/4 gallon caulk guns that you use for, you know, big applications. I know I used my caulk gun like this when I was putting in floorboards on the home I built and using industrial adhesive, and so it's not a normal size caulk gun, it's larger. And this one here is made by Newborn. It's a model 125, and I personally think it's bulletproof. It also has a fantastic design. It's not only all steel, but you can see that the rod that's used to go forward inside the tube, it's a hex rod. And most of the rods on caulk guns are a round rod and more susceptible to grip failures. And my Newborn has never failed me. And not only that, you know, the ones on Amazon are a lot of times a die-cast metal, and that's really a white metal. Easy to break if you drop in the right way, and there's no way this gun is going to break. And that was my objective, to make something that is going to be pretty much bulletproof. And then if there are parts that are going to, you know, have a tendency to break or need to be replaced, I'll be able to replace them no problem, which means I'm going to have this beef jerky gun forever, and that was my goal. I decided to name it the Big Bertha, and if you don't know where the original term came from, it was an artillery gun that the Germans made back in World War I. And as you can see, this thing is huge compared to the people standing around it working it. So that's where Big Bertha came from. Now, here's another picture here of the actual projectile, and that isn't even the whole, you know, the whole round. That's just the projectile. So pretty cool history on the words Big Bertha. And here's another picture of the Big Bertha taken apart. And getting back to that hex rod, it's I think a way more efficient for the latching mechanism and less prone to any type of grip failures. And you know, I'm not going to ever have to worry about that portion of the project. And even if for some reason I did something silly like run over it with a car or whatever, you know, this is not a real expensive gun. I can easily go find one on Amazon for around $21. So, you know, that's what we're going to start out with, and then we're going to change some of the parts of this newborn 125 caulk gun to make it into our own beef jerky gun. I want you to have some fun putting your beef jerky gun together. Might be a real good project for you to do with, you know, father-daughter, father-son project, whatever, and then go ahead and use it. But and don't be afraid if you don't have a 3D printer. We'll talk about that later. We'll solve that problem for you too on the parts that I designed on the 3D printer. So let's review some of the parts you're going to need. One of them is a 2-inch trap adapter, and I think you're going to find this at Home Depot. A lot of the box stores don't have them because most trap adapters go from a larger pipe to 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, and they work, but you're going to have a lot of wasted meat in the end. I found that out on my first beta version. So you need a 2-inch trap adapter. And the other thing we're going to need for that plunger I designed is some O-rings. Now, these are silicone O-rings, and these are much more food safe and much more durable than the black O-rings you would see for sale in a lot of places. So we're going to have links to all of this in the information section of the video, so don't worry about remembering all this. We'll have that for you. We're also going to need a fender washer. This has a 1/4 inch hole in the middle, and it's 1.25 inches in diameter. We're going to need that to secure that plunger. And then on the back side of the plunger, we're going to need these bushings. They call them lock collars, but basically they're just going to push up against the back side of that plunger, and then you tighten the set screw on one of the flats of that hex rod. And this is a nut. This is optional, but for some reason you lose the nut. You know, it's a metric nut. It's an M6, and it uses a 10 millimeter socket when you're putting it on. Your caulk guns, you can find those on Amazon. Here's one for $20 with Prime free shipping. You can see the good ratings it's got too, and I know I used one for a few years. So, and if you're near an Ace Hardware, I think you can save some money too. You could buy one there for about $16. So I think they exclusively are the caulk gun dealers for Ace Hardware. So you're looking for a newborn 125. Let's look at some of these parts I designed. This is the nozzle here, and what I didn't like about some of the stainless steel nozzles were they were a little too narrow, and because of that, it could create more pressure when you're trying to squeeze the handle of the caulk gun. I wanted something that was going to have real good diameter on it, real good flow, and also big enough where when you're done making your beef jerky, you could stick your finger in it and peel out some of the excess burger that's left in there. So I had to experiment with that size, and here's another picture of it here attached. And it's a hair over 3/16 of an inch as far as the slot, but it works really well. It's really easy to squeeze that handle and get it out. And we're going to have a working demo of this gun to show you how well it works later on. So hold on, and we'll show you that towards the end. This is the plunger, I like to call it, and this was I think the 16th revision of the designs. I had to sneak up on it and get just the right diameter, so when I put my O-rings on it, it was going to not only push the burger through, but a lot of these cheaper guns or poorly designed guns have what they call blowback, and the meat makes its way past the O-rings, and I couldn't have any of that. So we'll show you later how well that works. Here's another picture here of the plunger, and you can see that that hole is going to go over your hex rod no problem. And there's also an indentation on top for that fender washer, and that's just going to keep everything secured well. The other thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to print out this 2-inch tube. And the reason I took this picture here is the other thing you're going to have to do after you get your tube is you're going to have to sand a little bit of a bevel on the inside of it, because at some point one of those O-rings is going to meet the transition between the 2-inch pipe and that PVC adapter, and we don't want that O-ring having any trouble going into the PVC adapter, and then when you go to back out the rod, we don't want any trouble there. So we're just going to take some sandpaper. If you have a Dremel, that works good too, but just put a slight bevel all the way around. If you look, you can see it's easier to see on the left side of this picture where I've got a little bevel. I didn't go crazy, but it's definitely a bevel. Let's move on here. Now this is that 2-inch PVC trap adapter, and when I got it home and started to play with it, the first thing I noticed were these little nubs on the side here, which make it easier to tighten if you're actually using it in a plumbing situation. Now I decided to sand that nut on mine just to make it easier to turn the tube. If you don't have any power sanders, you may want to consider using a metal hacksaw blade to cut off those nubs. You can see here on this close-up that even with the nubs still on that nut, there's still space. Now obviously if I turn the tube and those nubs are towards the steel part of the caulk gun, well, our tolerances are going to go just about zero. Otherwise we're going to be fine, and let's move on. The other thing you're going to have to do too is you're going to have to glue that printed pipe, which is PLA plastic, into PVC. And I did some research. You can't just use clear PVC cement on PLA, and you wouldn't want to. That stuff is pretty strong. You don't want to melt, and distort that tube. The whole purpose of printing it is you've got a perfectly round circle. So what I recommend is just getting some epoxy, and what I did was you can see little pencil marks on that picture. That's just a little pencil line telling me, hey, don't put your epoxy above this line. And while holding the pipe vertical, after I had beveled not only the top side and the bottom side, that bevel I showed you should be done on both ends, then I just mixed up enough epoxy where I could take a small applicator stick or a screwdriver and run it around the whole perimeter of the pipe. And as you go to put the pipe in, start twisting it slowly. And it's important to remember to put the epoxy on the pipe. Don't put it on the female fitting, because it's just going to push everything down inside the fitting and it'll make a mess in there. By putting it on the pipe, it's going to want to try to creep out at the top. By you twisting it while you're putting it in, it's going to make a nice smear. I'll show you another picture here. This is what you're shooting for. Here's that nice smear, and that's going to hold. Epoxy is definitely an approved adhesive to glue PLA plastic to PVC. So let's move on here. This picture here just shows you how to glue this washer that I created and that goes inside the caulk gun. And you can see I've only got 4 little dabs of GE silicone on there. That's all you need. You don't need any more than that, and it's not going to come out. And the purpose of this washer is after I designed the 2-inch PVC trap adapter, I realized that my caulk gun had run out of rod to keep pushing the meat, and I had to resolve that. So I made this washer to drop into the end of the newborn 125, and it worked perfectly. It not only allowed all the meat to get pushed through at the end, and the other thing it solved too is if you look inside the hole is actually a taper. When you go to empty your beef jerky gun, you're going to find that nozzle might accidentally go into the hole and hit part of the caulk gun. So by me having the taper on there, it automatically guides it to the hole and nothing gets stuck. So that's the purpose of the taper, and the washer itself is just for extracting all that beef out of there properly. And you could probably use epoxy on that too, but I just happen to have some GE silicone and I like using that. But that doesn't matter. You can use either one. You're never going to be using this caulk gun for caulk ever again. So right about now, you're probably wondering, all right, Jim, so how are we going to get those 3D parts? Well, I'm not going to print them because just that tube alone took me 19 and a half hours. And, you know, if your printer's anything like mine, it's not going to do it much quicker. So what I'm going to do is put those STL files up on Thingiverse. If you get up to Thingiverse.com, just search for Pompano, Brownie, Big Bertha, Jerky Gun, and you'll find them. And there'll be 4 files, and then you can print them on your own printer, and I'll have all the printing tips on Thingiverse that you're going to need. And if for some reason you don't have a printer, well, you know, you can check with your local library or maybe a high school student that has a printer in the high school, and they can print it for you. Another option for you if you don't have a printer is you could go to Treatstock.com or CraftCloud.com, and you could send them the files, and you know, they can print them for you. Keep in mind though, when you go to those sites, especially Treatstock, they're probably a little more affordable, I found. You want to make sure that you pick the person who doesn't just have the rock bottom price. You want to find someone who's got really good ratings, and also you want to check the response time to questions. That's important too. You want them to have a decent price, obviously, but you know, make sure you check those ratings and response times before you pick your price point. Another big tip I want to give you is when you're on Treatstock and you have to upload your files, you want to make sure that you upload all 4 of the files that you got from Thingiverse. You know, you do that by holding down your control key and selecting all 4 files and then say upload. And by doing so, that's going to give you a price for that whole kit for all 4 parts. The other thing that's super important is to make sure that you pick transparent, and be careful. There's a few transparent colors in there. There's transparent orange or amber. So make sure you find the transparent that just says transparent. If you hover over it, you'll see it expand on its word if it's a colored transparent. And the other thing that's super important is you have to change the infill to 50. And your infill is how sturdy the object's going to be. So make sure you change that infill to 52, and then your price is going to be accurate, and you can fill out the rest of the questionnaire on, you know, where it's getting shipped to, etc. So just keep that in mind, and don't forget to do that, or you're going to end up getting parts that aren't going to be strong enough. So make a mental note of that, please. And that'll get your job printed, and you'll be on your way. Okay, so you've printed your own parts, or you ordered them and got them now. The next thing we're going to have to do is you're going to have to remove some of the supports on that plunger that I made. And this next video is going to show you how to do that. So let's watch that. Okay, guys and gals, when you go to order this print and get it back, it's going to have what they call supports. Right here and here, there are grooves, and if I didn't put supports in when they printed it, it would droop and sag, so it's no big deal. But I wanted to give you some tips on getting that out without messing it up. Now you can see here that I'm using a really small screwdriver, and if you look at the width of that screwdriver, and you know, it's definitely narrower than the groove I have, and to knock those supports out. And that's because I put it on a grinder. You could put it on a file, but if you go with something the same width or wider, you know, you're going to chew up your whole print job. So make sure you take care of business first, and
give it to a modeler who might have tools like that already. But I put this on a grinder. If you have a Dremel or even a file or sandpaper, you know, you could make it yourself. But let's show you how we get that out of there. What I like to do is just try to put it in the center as close as I can, and then give it a push. And you gotta watch out, you know, you'll put this right through your fingers if you're not careful. So you're pushing this way, keep your fingers out of there. And usually it takes a second push, and there it is. You can hear it. You're trying to come in at an angle like this, okay? You're not trying to go straight in. You're not trying to skim the surface. You're trying to go in at a little bit of an angle, so you know once you break through the bridge, you'll be able to ride the ridge. So let's get the rest of it out. And it's pretty easy after that. Just keep riding that angle. You can see it pops out really nice. But if you don't have the right tool, you're going to mess up your print. Look at how that comes out of there. Definitely got to spend a few minutes getting that screwdriver. Okay, so there's one, that's done. And with these PLA prints, don't mess up too much. If you see a little piece there, you know, try to knock it out. But let's get that second side now. Always takes a couple, 3 attempts to break through it. Got to rock it and not hit your fingers. There we go. Let's just follow that angle. And that way you'll have a nice clean groove for your O-rings. And then just drop these O-rings in after you've made sure, you know, there's no other debris left in there. All right, that's it. All right, let's do a quick review on how we tear apart this newborn 125 and make it a beef jerky gun. The first thing we got to do is get off that big factory washer on there. So, and by the way, that nut is that's an M6 10 millimeter. It's a metric. So if you ever lose it, that's what you need. First thing is we want to support that hex rod. So let's put a crescent wrench on there so we don't stress anything in case that's on really tight. All right. Okay, so that's off. Now we have to take one of these 3/8 inside diameter bushings, and we got to drop one of them on first. And then we're going to take our plunger part. We could put our O-rings on now, it'd probably be easier. I actually have silicone O-rings that are red ordered to replace these black ones, but you know, these work fine. And I'll have part numbers on Amazon for the silicone ones. They're going to be cheaper than buying these at Ace Hardware. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure, you know, this has an indent in the print job for this 1¼ fender washer, so that has to be on top. So let's go ahead and drop this on. Okay. We'll put on our washer. And you know, there's always a right side to the washer. Usually the edge of the sharp edge is the back side, and this is the top. It's a little more rounded, and usually it has the label on it by the manufacturer. So make sure that label's top side. You won't have any sharp edges. Put our M6 nut back on there. And there again, we want to make sure we support that hex rod Another reason this jerky gun works a lot better than some of the cheaper ones out there, because you know they use a round rod, and this hex rod provides better grip for the latching mechanism. Just change my socket here. Okay, we got that supported. Don't horse down on this thing, you know, it's got a nylon lock nut, and just snug, that's it, you know, otherwise you're going to break it right off or strip it out. All right, so now we just got to make sure that that is pushed as far forward as it can, and then you take your bushing, make sure you line up the bushing with one of the flats on the octagon shaft. And I'm going to hold that as tight as I can before I go to tighten it. Push on that bushing. That way there's no slop. And make sure it's lined right up with that. Okay, and once we get it snug, just there again, don't over tighten this again, just a little snug, and that's it. You know, that will, there's obviously pressure on there, but that's gonna seat nice enough, and that shouldn't come off on you, and that's it. Now you've just converted this thing to your beef jerky gun. I took the liberty of ordering a brand new newborn 125 caulk gun. I had to make sure that all of the dimensions were the same. You know, you got to remember the one I bought on top there, the orange one, was 25 years ago, and they are identical. And when I showed you how to prep that gun and take the parts off and put on mine, I forgot to mention, you know, you've got to get that bushing or spacer, whatever you want to call it, glued in, and I showed you how to do that with the silicone. So sorry for omitting that, but I wanted you guys to be confident that when you order this newborn, it's going to be identical and you weren't going to have any trouble with fitting parts on. So that is done, and when we do our live demo, we'll do it with the new caulk gun on the bottom.
All right, before we start that live demonstration, I wanted to talk to you about my recipe. Now, it's using the Nesco original jerky seasoning, and I like that flavor. They have a bunch of different flavors, but the reason I like Nesco is my wife is celiac, and this stuff is gluten-free, so it takes a lot of effort to put these spice packets together, and Nesco does a good job, and I'm glad they make it gluten-free. So we're also going to need 2 pounds of lean ground beef. Now, they do make stuff that's a little leaner than 93, but I like using that. That seems to work good for me. So 2 pounds of that. And for every 2 pounds of beef, we need a half a cup of water. That's important too. If you forget that, it's going to make the viscosity or thickness of your meat mixture a lot tougher to go through that gun. So that half a cup of water is pretty important. And that's per Nesco. That's not just my instructions. Now, where I differ is I like adding some brown sugar to my beef jerky for a couple of reasons. First of all, it tastes great. I think my wife enjoys it more, and I think kids would enjoy it more. And secondly, I've read several articles that say if you use sugar in your mix, it encapsulates the meat cells and doesn't allow them to get over dried in your dehydrator. And I think it works. It makes for more tender jerky, so it works both ways for me. Tastes great, and it definitely is easier to chew. And, you know, once you get your half a cup of water, just dump your curing salts in there. And I think it's important to take a spoon and keep stirring it until it's clear. There's no granules on the bottom. That's going to make sure when we mix it, you get nice even distribution through your meat when you're mixing it. And, once you've done that, just dump that water and that spice bag and mix that well, because we're going to be using that liquid to spice up our meat on the next step. Now you can just dump that on your 2 pounds of beef and mix that thoroughly. After you get it all mixed up, you're going to have to spend at least 2 minutes mixing it with your hands. Go ahead and put it in a glass container. I like using glass. The spices are pretty strong, and if you use it on any type of a plastic bowl, it may leave residual smells, and you'll get in trouble for that for sure. So put it in a glass bowl and cover it with some clear food wrap. And it's important to refrigerate it for 24 hours. And the reason behind that is the curing salts not only break down the muscle fibers, but their primary function is to draw out the moisture, and that inhibits the bacterial growth. So you're really going to end up with safer beef jerky by using the curing salts versus, coming up with some type of spice blend all on your own without curing salts. Once you've waited the 24 hours, it's a good idea to go ahead and shape these so they're going to easily drop into your big Bertha. If you don't do that, now you're trying to shape the meat and handle the gun, and it's just going to make for a bigger mess. So get all that done beforehand, and it makes for quicker work and a lot cleaner work for sure. So let's get on with a live demo. All right, it's finally time for the live demo, and we've got to gather some stuff. I'm going to make sure I've got plenty of paper towels over here. We've got some kitchen scissors over here to cut those strips as I'm using the jerky gun. We've got the jerky gun. Got some canola spray. I put 3 or 4 quick blasts down the tube. That's going to help for loading, and it's going to come out better too. You shouldn't have to do that every time you load it, just once. The meat itself is going to lubricate it after a while. And the other thing we have is the plunger bags. These are great value snack bags. They give you 100 bags, and they're 5.1 inches by 4.7. And these are going to go over the plunger. That's going to do a couple things for us. First thing it's going to do, it's going to keep this thing clean. It's got all sorts of juices going on inside this gun, and if they get underneath the O-rings, that's going to be difficult to clean. So it's not only going to keep the plunger clean, but it's also going to provide a form of lubrication as it's ramming all that meat through the big Bertha. So it works out great, and it's going to save us a lot of time and make cleanup easy peasy. So first thing I want to do is take that plunger bag, and we want to put that over the edge. Next thing we have to do is go get our beef, and I prepared all that to make it a lot easier. If you try to do this while you're making the jerky, it's a little bit of a pain. It's going to be a lot cleaner. Your hands are going to stay cleaner if you get all these done first. You just try to get them small enough where they're going to go down that 2-inch tube. So let's set this over here, and let's put our gun right over here. And we better get one of these, and let's go ahead and load this up. And at some point, I'm going to speed up the video. I'm not going to make you wait through 2 pounds of jerky, but you're going to know that this thing works well. This is actually the 3rd live demo. The first 2 worked fantastic. It's just the first beta had too much meat caught up in here, and then I also had to develop that washer on the end because it also was leaving meat in there because of that. So we changed this, we changed the washer. Now we're on the 3rd demo, and hopefully we've got perfection now. So let's go ahead and load this up. Sorry about that, forgot my dowel. And every time we drop one in, we're gonna try to tap it down and get rid of the air.
you're going to have some air, but just do your best. And we'll drop in another one. And we don't want to go all the way to the top. You can see how thick your plunger is, and what you want is you want your plunger to be able to go all the way in before it starts compressing the meat. So we'll probably have the meat go up to about here. Otherwise it might start squeezing out and making a big mess. So let's grab half of one of these and see how it goes here. All right, that ought to do it. That looks like that'll fit the whole plunger. And just for now, I think I'll put that meat back in the fridge. Get that out of our way. Okay. All right, so now make sure that you've got your lever all the way back. If you're not familiar with a caulk gun, all you do is, you push your button here, and that allows you to go forward and backwards. And our plunger bag is on. Try not to handle that plunger with raw meat. We always want to keep that as clean as we can. And let's drop this gun in. And usually when I'm running this thing, I don't like to run it like this. I have to hold my arm too high in the air. I like to have it sideways like this, and that works out pretty good. And the next thing we want to do is that bag has to be tucked in. So just tuck that in. All right, that's close enough. And what you're going to do is you're going to slowly start squeezing the handle and try to align your tube. That's the reason we sanded the bevel here at this end too, because we wanted that plunger to go in easily. And go slow, and now I know it's going in, so I'm okay now. So now I can start squeezing. Let's get our tray over here. I got my scissors ready. And I think what I'll do is I'll just do some long strips first, and then I'll speed up the film until we get it all done. But let's see how this works. And it really doesn't take any effort. It would probably be a lot easier if I had somebody else cutting, but that's okay. Might be more fun too if you got the kids involved. They could be the cutter, or they could run the gun. And make sure you leave enough space, because if you crowd them and have them touching each other, that won't help you in the dehydrator at all. These strips are coming out perfect, nice and easy to squeeze. And you gotta remember, this has been in the fridge for 24 hours, so it was really sticky. And another reason we want to put that canola spray in there too. Like I say, once we get the meat through there, the meat actually acts as a lubricant. I could probably be going faster here, but I don't want to make a mess when I'm cutting these off. And I am not in a rush. right. Well, I am so happy that that is working perfectly. I'm going to speed up that video now, but I'll talk to you in a few minutes here after we get the rest put out on the trays. I've got 5 trays to do, and I'm not going to make you wait through all of those. So let's go ahead and speed this up. All right, let's slow it down a bit. I just wanted to show you, I'm not sure what angle, I think I'll come around and look at this camera and make sure I'm giving you a good angle, but I wanted to show you how there is no blowback on this thing, you know, whoops, sorry. You know, and that's great. There is definitely a great seal there. I'll turn it on the other side so you can see that there's no blowback. I'm ready to load this for the last time, but. Okay, we'll slow things down a little bit now. So you can see I was fighting for space here, but it worked out great. I've got 5 trays and they're all full. And we got a couple crowded pieces here we're gonna have to take care of. But the important thing now is to open up the gun and see how much we have left in there. I'm gonna show you again that there's zero blowback there. You know, you've got, sorry about that. You've got a little bit of smear, but that's normal, you know, that's normal. All the way down, it's clean. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna go put these in the dehydrator and then we'll continue on. You know, you can see that this thing is spotless, and that's key. You know, I knew that if I was going to make a caulk gun into a jerky gun, that I had to have some way of keeping things a little cleaner, and that worked great. You know, these plunger bags are super cheap, and that worked out fantastic. Now, let's go ahead and see how much we have left in this. And look at that, it's empty. You know, all we have is what's left in the nozzle, and I'm not worried about that. I mean, you know, I'm gonna end up with a little bit of waste, but that doesn't bother me. And we talked about it earlier, but you know, those other nozzles that are stainless, they're really teeny, so to get the meat out, and all I've got to do is just go ahead and peel it out, and it's gonna get the lion's share out of there. And it's easier to clean, you know, where if I had the stainless, I would probably have to put it under high water pressure or something to get it, and that's all cleaned out now. All I got to do is run that under water, and that's not bad for waste there. I mean, if I had enough room, I would have turned that into a patty, but I'm not worried about it. You know, there's always going to be a little bit of waste. And that's going to do it for the demo. All right, I promised you guys a better way to remove that plunger and reload your jerky gun. Here's a picture of the Beta 2. That's got a few problems. You can see that the trap adapter's too small at one end, some wasted meat there. But the other problem I had too is when I went to pull that rod back to empty the tube and refill it, there was a ton of vacuum. And I knew I had to release that vacuum somehow, because it took 4 pulls at least just to get the tube out. And the reason it took 4 was there was too much pressure to grab the rod and push the release button and pull the rod completely out in one fell swoop. It just wasn't going to happen, and I knew in the back of my head that that was not good. You know, I had solved the problems with the plunger not getting blowback, but that created another problem of usability. I had to make it easier to refill that gun. And let's look at a quick video of the old way, and then I'm going to show you the new way. So let's look at the old way first. You can see here when I'm trying to pull this rod out that it's going to take me probably 4 times to remove that. And, you know, that's just too much work. Plus, there was way too much vacuum. It definitely wasn't easy to pull on that rod, and I had to make it easier somehow, and this is what I came up with. All right, well, I actually had to do a 4th demo to show you guys the easier way to empty that tube on the Big Bertha. And in just a second here, I'm going to run out of jerky meat, and we'll show you how that works. I also used a silicone mat and put it up against that backsplash. We're going to be using that backsplash in a minute here. And I've also incorporated this new way into our dowel. You know, the dowel isn't just for tamping the meat in. I'm going to probably clean it here in a minute, but there's actually a small hole in the end of the dowel, and that's going to go into the Big Bertha and go over the nut in there. But first we're going to have to release our lever and pull that lever back, which is super easy, just to have it touch the end of the gun, and then we're going to take the nozzle off. Taking the nozzle off is going to allow us to get rid of that vacuum. Now we've got all sorts of air in there, and that's going to solve 80% of the problem, but I still want it even easier to empty this. So now we take our dowel and we take the end with the small hole in it. It's a 1/2-inch hole, and we drop it in over the nut, and that keeps it centered. And we have to push the release lever, hold it. I like flipping it over on this side. Push the release lever, and then put your thumb on the side and push. And it is that easy. Now all we have to do is get that dowel out, and that's it. You know, that's how easy it is to empty it now, and I knew I needed that.
In regards to making that dowel, I made sure I got my dowel at Lowe's. I didn't like some of the dowels they had at Home Depot because they had these proposition warnings for California, almost like they were using glued up pieces of wood. So, get your dowel at Lowe's. It's going to be a solid piece of poplar. And I like getting the 1 1/8 inch dowel. It came in a 4-foot length, and yep, you're going to have some extra, but who knows? You might co-op and decide to make 2 or 3 of these big Berthas, and you're going to need more than one piece of dowel at 12 inches long. So once you get that cut at 12 inches, now you've got to get that 1/2 inch hole in the end. And if you use a regular drill bit, it's not going to come out the way you want. I wanted a nice flat bottom hole. I'm only going about a 1/4 inch deep, just enough to have that nut go all the way in, and my dowel's going to touch that fender washer. And a Forstner bit is what you want. And I'm going to give you links to that too. And, who knows? You might have a woodworking buddy who's got a Forstner bit, and you don't have to buy some of this stuff. But that's what I like using, is that Forstner bit. So once you get that cut to size and the hole in the end, you've got everything you need. Now, in regards to the silicone mat, I'll have a link to that too. I actually liked working on that. My cleanup time was less. I didn't have a bunch of ground beef stuck to the counter. I didn't want any ground beef on the backsplash. I didn't want to take the chance of, scratching the backsplash. Who knows what you've got? You might have Formica, you might have ceramic tiles, who knows? So I just liked working on it, and I end up using that silicone mat quite a bit too. We make sausage rolls out of fresh dough, and it works great when you've got really thin dough and you want to roll something and not have it bust apart. You can roll that mat to make those sausage rolls. So I'll have a link for that too. And that ends that portion as far as making the Big Bertha easier to empty. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is a mod I made for the bottom of the Big Bertha. You've got to remember, this used to be a caulk gun, and that big long steel rod is for puncturing the end of your tube of caulk. And I did not like having it there. I wasn't going to have you guys drill out the rivet or anything like that. That wasn't necessary. But I didn't want you guys getting poked by that rod, especially when you're pushing up against the backsplash. So all I did was take a nice piece of heavy-duty duct tape. I like the brand made by Duck, and that works pretty good, but you can use what you want. And just wrap it around the end of that rod. Here's a before picture before I made that mod, and here's the after picture, and it just keeps it nice and clean. And if your hand were to accidentally slip, we don't want to get hurt here. We're trying to make beef jerky, not shish kebab humans. So that mod I thought was worth mentioning, and it really helped improve the safety of the product. All right, and I forgot to mention, once you get your bottle brush, make sure that you wash all your components by hand. Do not put this stuff in a dishwasher. Some of these modern dishwashers get way hotter than 140 degrees. And this is PLA plastic. The reason I had to print this versus using 2-inch Schedule 40 is you might think Schedule 40 is round, but it's not. And it was a total fail because there was big gaps on the side, getting a bunch of blowback. And if you take care of this, it will literally last you forever. Clean it up good with warm water, not scalding hot. Rinse it with warm and then cold to get rid of the soap. Dry it off and put it in a box and throw it in your closet for the next trip. You'll have this thing forever. Well, that's going to wrap it up, guys and gals. You stuck with me here for almost an hour, and we packed a lot of information in there, but I hope you have as much fun building this gun as I did. Sometimes the journey is better than the destination. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the Pompano Brownie channel, and that'll do it for this video.